Hi everybody, this is the grade 10 lesson, unit 6B, and today's topic is augmented, minor, and diminished intervals. So a quick review from last year. In grade 9 we were doing intervals that were all derived from the major scale. And we had intervals that were either major or perfect, depending on which distance they were we measured them from the root. So a quick review reminds us there are two parts to every interval. So we have distance and we have quality. Distance being the number, quality being what precedes that number. So up until this point, it's either been a perfect or a major. And the information that we learned from last year remains the same. So the overall numbers and letter names of each major scale will not be changed. So you can see we have perfect first, fourth, fifth, and eighth, and 2, 3, 6, 7 are all major intervals. Moving into what we're learning this year. So because we've learned about minor scales this year earlier, we know that we're going to have some alterations with our intervals. We're not always going to be having either major or perfect intervals. So what does change is the quality of the intervals individually this year. So by altering the distance between the two notes of an interval by a semitone, the quality of the interval changes. And then naming these changes in quality is accomplished by using the major scale intervals as benchmarks. And we're going to use this chart that you can see here to illustrate what's taking place. So, major benchmark interval, again, 2, 3, 6, 7, and the perfect benchmark interval is 1, 4, 5, and 8. So in our column here, that's what you're seeing in this chart in the third column. As we move, so if we wanted to take a major interval and lower it by a semitone, we create a minor interval. We can also take a major interval and lower it an additional semitone to get what's known as a diminished interval. And if we go in the opposite direction by raising a major interval a half step, we create an augmented interval. Moving down, if perfect is our benchmark, we can only go either diminished or augmented. There are no minor intervals, and remember this from last year. Similar how we don't have any like major fourths, things like that. But we can still alter them by a semitone. So if we take a perfect interval and lower it by a semitone, we create a diminished interval. And if we take that perfect interval and raise it by a semitone, we'll create augmented. So you'll notice in this chart that either a major or a perfect benchmark, if it's raised, will become augmented both times. The difference being, though, is when we're going in this direction. So we're lowering the pitches of those notes. Major can be lowered twice, but a perfect can only be lowered once. So when it comes to naming intervals, rather than identifying them as major or perfect, like MAJ2 and P2, we're going to actually add some nomenclature. So last year we had plus for major, P for perfect. That still remains in place. Minor intervals are going to have a negative sign, kind of like what we're using for our minor scales. Augmented is represented with an X. Looks like a double sharp if you want to think of it like that. And diminished is represented by a 0 or just a lowercase circle. Moving on. So when it comes to writing intervals, how do we do it? Well, it's exactly the same as it was last year. So because last year, when we were writing our intervals, just a quick review of the steps in the process. So the benchmark, major or perfect interval using the steps that we learned from last year is the first step to do. And then always name the interval under the staff. So treble clef, we're asked to write an augmented seventh above a D. And so we're going to go through the sequence of steps to illustrate how we're going to arrive at that augmented seventh. So the first step is identifying the pitch D, which is what we've got here. And then the next step is we're going to count the distance of the interval. So we're going to count up a seventh above a D, and we know that we're going to get a C something. But if we pause there for just a moment, so from last year we remember that the bottom note, we have to make some assumptions, and we have to assume that the bottom note is the tonic of the key that we're in. If we don't have that as our reference, we actually can't solve these interval questions. So we're going to assume we're in the key of D major, which has two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. So because we're landing on a seventh here of D major, it's in order for it to be a major seventh, it would be a C sharp. Currently what we have in this case is actually a minor seventh. We're going to get to that in a minute. But so really our benchmark is here. So because it's a 7, the benchmark is a major interval. It's not a perfect. Remember, that's 1, 4, 5, 8. Everything else is major. So here's our benchmark interval that we're referring to. So we go back to this chart for just a moment. Here we are at the major. Now, this question is asking us to augment the seventh above a D. So we look at our chart. We're currently here as our benchmark. We have to augment that interval. So if we look on our chart, we're not going to be going in this direction. We've got minor and diminished. We don't want that. Augmented, we're actually going to be going to the right. And that means we're going to be raising that interval by 1/2 step, or by a semitone. So C sharp's the benchmark. That's our major seventh. If I want to create an augmented seventh, I need to raise that C sharp a semitone, which means I need to create a double sharp above a D. And there we have an augmented seventh. Let's look at another example. This is an augmented interval from a perfect interval. So in this question, we're asked to do an augmented fourth above a B flat. And we're in the bass clef. So again, we identify the bottom pitch, B flat. What's the fourth note above B flat? It's an E something in this case. Or if you already know your key signature, B flat major. Again, it's going to be what we're trying to use as the reference to solve this question, as always, major scales. E flat is a perfect fourth above a B flat. So because we've got a fourth, we know that a benchmark is going to be a perfect interval. So again, if I look back to this chart really quickly, here's our benchmark, and in this question we're also asked to do an augmented interval, augmented fourth above a B flat, which means we need to raise the E flat by a semitone, which is going to give us an E natural. So an E natural above a B flat is that augmented fourth. Let's look at a few more, going in a different direction. So we're going to go and we're going to draw some minor intervals from major intervals. Again, because we're saying from major, from perfect, because those again are our benchmarks. So treble clef again, E is the bottom pitch. What's a third above an E? Well, let's again for a moment remember from last year in grade 9, bottom note, major key. This is E major with 4 sharps. G sharp would be a major third above an E natural, which is what our benchmark is going to be here. Okay, so again, go back to my chart for a minute. Benchmark, we've created G sharp above an E natural, but we actually need to create a minor interval, which means we need to lower the G sharp by a semitone, which is why we've got a natural symbol for that G. And to get a diminished interval from a major, this is the question, or this is the scenario by which you will be lowering your benchmark interval 2 times, or 2 semitones from major. Back to the bass clef, we're asked to draw a diminished sixth above an F. So F is the benchmark. We assume we're in the key of F major. F major has 1 flat, it's B flat. Everything else is a natural pitch. So the 6th note of F major is actually a D natural. So we have a major 6 here. There's no need to alter that top pitch because it's diatonic. It matches the key of F major. However, that's not what we're asked to draw. It's a diminished 6. So here's our benchmark. We're at major. If I lower it by a semitone, I get a minor. But I need to go an additional semitone to get diminished. So I'm actually lowering it by 2 semitones. Remember, from major to get diminished. It's the only time this goes down by 2 semitones. So that D natural, if I put a flat in front of it, that's by 1 semitone. I need to lower it an additional semitone. So that's why we've got a D double flat for that question. And last here, we'll just look at how to get a diminished interval from a perfect interval. So a diminished fifth above a G. Back to the treble clef, we assume we're in the key of G major. We're going to create our benchmark. Benchmark, because it's a 5, is going to be a perfect. So a D natural above a G is a perfect fifth. Remember, D natural is diatonic to G major. There's only 1 sharp G major. It's an F sharp. Doesn't concern us in this question. However, again, we're not just drawing a perfect interval anymore. We're asked to draw a diminished interval, which means we need to lower that top pitch, which is a D, by a semitone to create a diminished fifth. And what the diminished fifth, so we'll just add this here. So that's what our diminished fifth is going to be used to represent the fact that we've lowered it by a semitone from perfect. And that's basically it. So now we've got a whole bunch of questions to go through. I will go through a sequence of each of these at random, just to give you a sense of what's taking place. So let's start off, we'll start off at the beginning on this question. So we're in the treble clef. And we can see below we've got 4 C's, and we're going to just basically be going through all of the variations of the possible intervals that we can have with a distance of a sixth going above a C. So again, bottom note, major key, benchmark interval. It's a 6. We know we're dealing with the major 6 as our benchmark. So C major, pretty easy to start off. We know there are no sharps or flats in the key of C major. Therefore, we just have to count up to the 6th note. The 6th note being an A. And because I've already remembered that my key signature is basically non-existent for C major, I already have an A major 6. So a C to an A natural, that's a major 6th. I'm going to go ahead, and you can do this for this question. You could actually just go ahead and fill in the rest of these because it's a distance of a 6 every time. The quality is going to change, but the distance won't. So I can go ahead and just write in my other A's. So we're done the first question. The second question is asking us to go from a C to an A, and this time it's saying raise it by basically a semitone from the major. So again, just to refer back to the chart really quick here, benchmark was major. This question beside it is saying raise it by a semitone effectively. So we're going to get an augmented sixth above a C is an A sharp. C, again, here's my benchmark. So to that chart, if I lower it by semitone, I create a minor interval. So again, we're going back to here. So in effect, this needs to be an A flat. And then last, if I go from getting to a diminished sixth, if I want to think from two ways I can approach this, I can take it, look at it from a minor sixth, looking at my chart, right, I'm going down another semitone, or I can use my chart and use my benchmark and then remember, oh, it's a sixth lowered twice from there. So this is just a way, just a way of illustrating basically what's taking place with these questions. That's the first set. So the second question says, write the following intervals above the given pitch. So we'll just go through, we'll do maybe the first, and we'll do the third question. Why not? Okay, so bottom note, this is basically, again, just like it was in grade 9 all over again. So bottom note is an F. We assume we're in the key of F major. We've got a perfect interval, so I know that that note that I draw above an F is going to be diatonic to the key of F major. What's the fifth note of F major? F, G, A, B flat, C. And check to make sure that that note matches. It does at F major. We've only got one B flat. Everything else is natural. So that one's pretty straightforward. Let's have a look at, actually, we'll just do the whole first line. Why not? So G flat, minor 6. Let's assume, again, we'll ignore the minor 6 for a moment. Let's create our benchmark interval. It's a 6, so the benchmark's going to be a major 6. So for a moment, let's imagine G flat major with our 6 flats. What's the sixth note of G flat major? G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat is the sixth note. To be a major 6, it would be an E flat. However, we're asked to draw a minor 6. So if I go to my chart, major, got to get to a minor, which means I need to lower it by a semitone. So we just said it was E flat, so this question is going to be actually an E double flat, is a minor 6 above a G flat. A flat major, again, we got a minor second. We know that the benchmark is going to be a major second. What's basically the second note of A flat major? The answer is B flat to be a major second, but it needs to be a minor second, which means I need to lower it by a semitone. So it's going to be B double flat. Okay, let's have a look at this next question. Bottom note's a D sharp. We're asked to draw a perfect fourth of a D above, a D sharp. Okay, key of D sharp major. Well, hold on a second. There is no such key as D sharp major, and you're right. Now, there is a D sharp minor, and you could technically solve your interval questions. I haven't mentioned this yet. You could solve these using major scales and minor scales. However, it's a good practice if we can remain consistent with our keys and just always solve based on a major scale. That way we're using the same techniques and we're really reinforcing the concepts of how the intervals are, the distances and the qualities are changing. And we're not confusing different tonalities. So let's, again, so D sharp major, well, we know that doesn't exist. So how are we going to solve this question? The third page of your guide walks through the process by which we're going to do this. So special questions, what do you do when it's not a tonic of a major scale? So basically, you're just going to ignore the fact that it says D sharp and just remove the sharp from the equation. Make that bottom note match a key that you know how to solve for. So let's take the D sharp. Let's just momentarily ignore the fact that there's a D sharp there. I am just going to cover that D sharp up. Now I'm just going to solve for a perfect fourth above a D natural. Okay, I can do that. D major, 2 sharps, D, E, F sharp, G. So if this was a D natural, G natural above a D is a perfect fourth. I'm finished this question. Now we add back the D sharp. What I've effectively done is I've taken the distance between those two notes, and it was perfect fourth, but now I've raised that bottom note, which means I need to maintain the distance and quality between the D sharp to that G. So it means if I raise the bottom a semitone, I have to raise that top note by a semitone to maintain the distance. So it's actually going to become a G sharp. So D sharp to a G sharp is a perfect fourth. You can also think of it, well, a D to a G, like we just said, was a perfect fourth. So again, that's just the relationship. The ratio needs to be maintained to be the same. Okay. There's another one of those questions, a little sneaky one down here, and it's above a G sharp as well in this question. And it's asking for a diminished sixth above a G sharp, and we're in the alto clef. So G sharp major, again, a key that doesn't exist. So ignore the fact that it's that is your pitch. Cross out that G sharp. G, what's the sixth note above a G? It's an E. And a diminished sixth above a G. So a G to an E natural is actually a major sixth. A G to an E flat is a minor sixth. A G to an E double flat is a diminished sixth. So if this was not G sharp, momentarily it isn't, this is going to be an E double flat. However, it's become a G sharp, which means I've raised that bottom note a semitone, so instead of an E double flat, this question is just going to become an E flat. Those ones are sneaky. They're not too bad. We don't get too many of them, but just illustrating that you can still solve these questions even though the bottom note might not be a key that actually technically exists in a major tonality. So again, this last page of your guide walks through basically what I just described in how to solve those questions. So there we have it. There's Unit 6B, solving intervals, perfect, major, minor, diminished, and augmented. So we've added a few extra categories from where we had in grade 9. Next lesson will be on inverting of intervals. So thanks everybody, and we'll catch you on the next lesson. Bye for now.